Thank you, Marty, for that generous and far too carefully researched introduction. The Ray and Jay show may be coming to a prom or bar mitzvah near you sometime. I don't know. I appreciate that, and thank you to Onion and Mr. Hamilton for the nice things as well. I'm truly honored that Danny and Marty drove all this way to be a part of today's events. I hope we can all find friends who are as loyal and as generous and as giving as they are. I'm not sure I know too many people who would drive 5 hours to speak for 5 minutes, but thank you both for being here. It means a lot to me. I'm going to begin this Founders Day address with some rather simple advice based on my experience. Mr. Hamilton mentioned the heads of school at Petty. I've worked for a third of them. Mr. Potter back there hired me. Ms. Seltzer, whose image is not displayed here in this chapel, an oversight I think we should work on. And then Mr. DeGray, Mr. Green, Mr. Quinn, and now Mr. Hamilton. And based on that, let me tell you that when the head of school shows up at your office door or sends you an email, you better watch out. There's probably a task waiting for you, as Mr. Mooney just recounted. That's how I ended up in many of these roles. Now, I'll confess that I let my guard down this fall with a new guy. I had known Mr. Hamilton through the admission world for almost 20 years before he arrived at Petty to be head of school. And early this winter, I received an unsolicited email from him that began by telling me he was gathering the administrative team at his house for a holiday gathering. A warm and fuzzy feeling came over me. This new guy Hamilton is all right, I thought to myself. He knows that I was on that planning team for 20 years, and he's going to bring me back to celebrate the holidays with my former teammates. That's really nice. Then I read the second sentence. I was wondering if you would serve as administrator on duty that night so we can all get together for the holiday celebration. Lesson learned. So my spidey sense was tingling when I got an email last month asking me to stop by the head's office, and here I am. It's no coincidence that I've got this tie on this morning. I had a lot of wins in that tie. I hope I got one more left in me. In truth, I am honored to have been asked to be the Founders Day speaker. This is an important day for the school. I'm not old enough to have been here when Dr. King spoke from this spot, but I have been in this room when Cory Booker and Colin Powell and Governor Tom Kean and Henry Kissinger and Walter Annenberg spoke here. But more importantly, and more significantly to me, I have heard countless students and other members of the Petty community speak from their collective hearts in this space. I've been here for moments of great joy and great sadness, weddings as well as funerals. The community gathered here on the morning of 9/11 in a particularly powerful moment. And this place has always been a source of great inspiration and comfort, and I always feel a deep sense of connection to this sacred place. So it's my pleasure to share my thoughts with you this morning. Now, as you've gathered from Mr. Mooney's introduction, perhaps my primary qualification to be your speaker this morning is that I'm old. I am so old. Thank you. Anybody watch Ted Lasso? I know you're too old for Jack Benny. Okay. When I came to Petty for my interview in the spring of 1986, Jack Nicklaus was at Augusta, Georgia, and beginning to play in the golf tournament that would result in his 6th green jacket. He is now 86 years old. In the fall of 1986, I was the dorm soup in AC when the baseball rolled through Bill Buckner's legs, and the curse of the Bambino was extended yet again for us long-suffering Red Sox fans. The young man who lived next door to my apartment in AC was a huge Mets fan, and he took great delight in that reversal of fortune. That young man is now probably older than Mr. Hamilton. Sadly for Mr. Mooney and the rest of the Mets fans, that was the last World Series win for that franchise. The films Top Gun and Platoon ruled the box office in 1986. Tom Cruise and I were born within a few weeks of each other, but he seems to have less gray hair than me. And as an aside, it might be worth noting that Oliver Stone's film about the conflict in Vietnam was released 11 years after the end of the U.S. involvement in Southeast Asia. Today, we are nearly 25 years beyond 9/11. So I was old when I am old. 23 of the current employees of Petty were students at Petty during my time. I taught, coached, knew the parents of 32 of you folks here in the room today. And 61 of the current Petty employees were born after I started teaching. So we have established that I am old. And I hope that my experience might inform my talk today. As I told my first period history class this morning, I've been here 40 years. If I spend 3 or 4 minutes a year, we'll be out of here in 2.5 hours. I won't do that. But my history students, both current and former, know that I like to make references to popular culture. I would love to be on Track Star with Jack Coyne, but no, I would probably be relegated to Yacht Rock. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is my favorite movie. Step Brothers was underrated, right, Mr. Rulowich? When it came out in 2008. I've watched The Proposal from 2009 and The Town from 2010 more times than I dare to admit. 2 very different films, of course. And Steven Spielberg is the only director that I have worked for in the summer of 1974. Really. So I've been thinking about what lessons from popular culture I might share with you. My speech at Mr. Mooney's installation a year ago relied heavily on the philosophy of New Jersey's own Bruce Springsteen. And it's a good bet that I'll return to his words before I leave the podium this morning. But American film history is full of inspirational messages, particularly from coaches, both fictional or based on real events. As the last remaining former ice hockey coach at Petty, still at the school, and with the Olympics at full swing, I thought about Herb Brooks, coach of the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team at Lake Placid, or at least the 2004 Disney version of him in Miracle. Great moments are born from great opportunity. Now, if you're interested in hockey films, I encourage you to watch Mystery Alaska, 1999, with Russell Crowe, or Slapshot with Paul Newman from 1977, but please make sure you're 18 if you watch that one. And long before Heated Rivalry, Patrick Swayze and Rob Lowe starred in Youngblood, coincidentally released in 1986. As a former Petty soccer coach, I was drawn to the more recent fictional coach, Ted Lasso, who encourages us to be curious, not judgmental. That seems like good advice, too. And it's not just cinematic coaches who offer us guidance. There are many inspirational teachers in film. Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, 1989, teaches us that words and ideas can change the world. And then he asks his students, what will your verse be? Principal Vernon of the Breakfast Club, 1985, reminds us none too subtly, don't mess with the bull, young man, or you'll get the horns. And finally, my high school career was shaped by the 1979 classic Animal House, in which Dean Wormer of Faber College counsels a young Kent Dorfman with the timeless advice, fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son. That's another one that you should probably be 18 to watch. While any of these cultural references might form the foundation for this speech, I realize that Founders Day is about Petty, not Hollywood. We gather to honor Petty's history, to celebrate Petty's founders, the people who have shaped this institution over the last 162 years. And as I have been a part of nearly a quarter of that history, that seems like the best place to begin. And it is perhaps little more than a penetrating glimpse into the obvious to suggest that much about Petty was different in the fall of 1986 when I moved into my apartment on the second floor of AC. There were no separate entrances then. My apartment was 2 student rooms connected with a small kitchen and bathroom. There were 39 upper-class boys who lived there. There were 3 showers, not 3 per floor, 3 showers in the building, and 3 payphones provided the only connection to the outside world beyond campus. No cell phone, no email, no text, no WeChat, no WhatsApp, no FaceTime. The phones were taken off the hook at the start of study hall, and the first person to connect, either to make a call or receive a call at the end of study hall, got to connect with someone outside the gates. There are a number of other stories from those years in AC that I probably should not recount here. Naked slip and slide, scary events of my first Blair Day. But I can share with you the tale of my very first Saturday night, my welcome to Petty moment. It occurred when a young man who lived on the first floor made some questionable decisions. Well, they were bad decisions. He returned to his room, he didn't check in, and he promptly threw up all over himself and everything in the room. We had 38 boys in AC for the second week. Now, I might point out that that student does not hold the record for the shortest Petty career in my time here. When I arrived at Petty, the orientation for new students was known as NSOP, New Student Orientation Program. Tremendously creative name. And a highlight or lowlight of that weekend, depending on your point of view, was a dance, the infamous NSOP dance, held in the old student center, which stood where the Science Center is now. Unfortunately for Petty, the tone of this event felt more like a last gasp end of summer blowout than a chance to sharpen your focus on the upcoming academic year. And in my first year living in Potter North, 1992, a young woman again made some regrettably poor decisions, and as a result, she had packed up and gone home before classes even began. For a bit more context in this regard, I served as chair of the discipline committee for a few years in the early 1990s. In that 1992-93 academic year, the DC met 15 times before Christmas, including the aforementioned incident from orientation. So it was a different place. The most obvious differences at Petty are in the physical plant, the buildings, the facilities. When I arrived at Petty, what you know as Annenberg Hall was called Memorial Hall, hence the large plaque in the lobby. The name was changed after the Annenberg gift. The Annenberg Library had not yet been built, so on the back side of Annenberg, the side facing the baseball field, was a rather weather-beaten, lean-to structure affectionately known by the students as the butt hut. If your parents had given you permission to smoke, you could go to the butt hut after family style and enjoy a cigarette or two before it was time to get to study hall. The old stone steps in Memorial Hall in the stairway were contoured by thousands of footsteps going up and down the stairs. They're no longer here because of the renovations. The basement of Annenberg has served many purposes over the year. The bookstore, security, college counseling, the alumni office, the senior lounge, they've all been housed there at one point. And when I got to Petty, the basement of Annenberg housed the biggest men's room I'd ever seen outside of Madison Square Garden. And so now, the throne from which Mr. Puri oversees his business office empire was a much different throne, if you know what I mean. The Art Center was not yet built. That was a maintenance shop and parking for vans. The entire visual arts department was located on the first floor of Long Street. There was no music at Petty other than Mrs. Seltzer would organize an ad hoc string ensemble from time to time. The Science Center was not built. The current History House was the science department. The Kelly Reading Room was a planetarium. And the History Department was on the second and third floors of Coates Coleman, and the library located on that first floor where Alumni and Development Office now stands. The current Science Center was built about 10 years after the current Student Center was built about 10 years after I got here. The Health Center used to be in the basement of Masters, not terribly accessible if you were either sick or injured. There was no academic support, minimal counseling services, and the Health Center and Youth Center were built much later. The current pool, fitness center, turf field, none of that existed. And the key to fitness at Petty was quite literally the key or pin for a universal machine that was located in the back corner of the field house. No wood basketball courts at that point either. I thought I might actually have one of those pins in my house. I may, but I couldn't find it. Ding, Izzo, the Potter dorms, the Marabot-Casperson dorms, the Kay and Green dorms, the Armelino courthouses, Main Street duplexes, all of those have been added since I got here. And as you might imagine, the academic program was quite different as well. Schedule was 6 periods a day, no rotating schedule, no long blocks, no blue and gold weeks. We had classes every Saturday, and every Saturday, every class met for 30 minutes. So you went 35 minutes in between. Most students took 4 or 5 classes. It was impossible to take more than 6. Freshmen took no history. There was no chorus or orchestra, as I mentioned. No internet, no email, no technology in the classrooms. There were old chalkboards in every classroom on campus. The height of technology was the 15 electric typewriters in the typing classroom in Annenberg Hall. And the program was different too. When I first got to Petty, the graduation requirement in math was that students had to pass 2 terms of Algebra 2. 2 terms. And in the spring, there was a course offered called Repeat Algebra 2. So if you had failed either the fall or the winter term, it didn't matter, you went back again in the spring to make sure you got your diploma. The history department faculty was all white men, as the photo in the case in the history house attests. The AM was a mimeograph sheet of paper delivered to each classroom before first period. Teacher comments were written by hand. The dean's office contacted students by having notes hand-delivered to class. I could share many more examples, but I've described for you some of the many ways in which Petty was different 30 or 40 years ago. But I hope the careful listener will note the intentional emphasis on description. I have offered no evaluation of Petty, either in 1986 or 2026. I have purposely not made any comparison about relative strengths or quality of the experience between the various moments in Petty's history. And that brings me to my first message. I was drawn to Petty in 1986 because I believed it was a school with great possibilities, despite the challenges, some of which I just outlined. And while Petty's collective fortunes have increased, and the physical plan has certainly expanded, I felt I was wholly committed to Petty from the outset because it was a special place. And just as I believe a person is not necessarily a better person if they've accumulated possessions, Petty is not a better school simply because we have a larger endowment, nicer facilities, or more course offerings. And we, collectively, are not suddenly or automatically better teachers, students, or citizens because we find ourselves here and connected to a school with these resources. And I think it's important to remember that Petty of the late 1980s and early 1990s, that's the school to which Walter Annenberg donated $100 million. As our friends in Alumni and Development Office remind us, people make philanthropic contributions to worthy institutions, not needy ones. And Ambassador Annenberg and I found Petty to be worthy, even if it was not perfect. Annenberg visited campus frequently. Sometimes he didn't even tell people he was coming. He interacted with students. He met with Mr. DeGray and Ms. Seltzer, and he was impressed with what his school had become since his graduation in 1927. He saw the possibilities that lay ahead for Petty, and he knew Petty would make the most of the opportunities his gift provided. Great moments are born from great opportunity. And those of us who are here at Petty in June of 1993, I think that's just Mr. Gartner and Mrs. Lloyd, not many of us left, we were filled with optimism because this gift created possibilities for Petty that we hadn't dared to dream. It was a transformational moment for the school. But those of us who were here, we also spent considerable time and effort thinking about what we wanted to maintain about Petty. We did not want to create a wholly new school, as there was much of value that distinguished Petty. There was much to defend. And that decision is as much a part of the Petty story as are the changes. So what was it about Petty that convinced Ambassador Annenberg to invest so deeply in the place? Well, I can't speak for the ambassador, but I'll focus on 2 factors with meaning to me. The first is the people I encountered at Petty, all of the people connected to this place. When I came to campus for my job interview, I had 2 student tour guides who instantly won me over. I was struck by their pride in the school, their excitement, their curiosity, their down-to-earth demeanor, their lack of pretension, their commitment, their optimism, and their genuine warmth. And my appreciation for the people of Petty only increased as I got to know the school. I've spent a lifetime in and around independent school campuses, and I can say without reservation or qualification that some of the very best independent school people I have known were at Petty. Some still are. When I arrived at Petty in 1986, Mr. Corica, who some of you know, Mr. Oram, Harry Holcomb, Mrs. Seltzer, Mrs. Schwieger, Mr. McClellan, Mr. Treese, not the 2 you know, their fathers. Back then, the Mr. Treese and Mr. McClellan you knew were knuckleheads who played on soccer teams that I coached. But when I arrived at Petty, the heart and soul of the school was shaped by wonderful boarding school people, several of whom went on to be heads at other schools. People like Mr. Tattersall, Miss Higgins, Mr. and Mrs. Clemens, Miss Danish, Mr. Davidson, the Watkins, the Moonies, Mr. Newman in building services, Cheryl in petty food services, Mr. Ralph on the grounds crew, and many, many more. These people were legendary for their commitment to students, to each other, and for their deeply felt passion for this place. In my experience, Petty has always, even back in 1986, had great teachers, great coaches, great dorm faculty, as well as great students. And the meaningful relationships forged with each other has made this a special place, even back in the 20th century. I remain in touch with many of my former students, athletes, and advisees of mine stretching back 40 years. Many of them still call me Mr. Cabot. And these strong relationships did not depend on laptops or smart boards, a turf field, or a sports performance training center, all of which are great things for Petty. But the relationships were most important. And together, these remarkable people forged a shared sense of community, cultivated a shared culture, and embodied a set of institutional values that were the foundation of Petty in those years, and it is this culture of Petty that has kept me here for so long. Truth be told, I thought I'd be at Petty for 2 or 3 years and then make my way back to New England, where everyone else in my family resides. And in full disclosure, not everything was great about the culture of Petty in 1986. We allowed an initiation tradition to continue that was blatant hazing. Credit to Mr. DeGray for ending that as soon as he arrived. And I think it's fair to say that the professional staff of Petty, food service, building services, and so on, were not treated with the respect they deserved by the adults as well as by the students. Mr. Potter was working on changing that. And when I arrived at Petty, we had what were called scholarship jobs that students receiving financial aid had to do, but students who were paying full tuition did not. Not a good look for Petty. But overall, in my estimation, the culture of Petty was positive and took shape throughout the community. Those positive qualities I observed in my tour guides were embodied in others. There was a sense that we were all in this together, and that experience engendered great pride in Petty. There were accomplished students and athletes, teachers and coaches, but Petty represented a humility that was refreshing. And there was something of an underdog mentality, a scrappiness that grew out of the recognition that we needed to do more with less because of our limited resources. We were focused on the core mission of Petty, in part because there were no frills. And I think it's fair to note that it has grown increasingly difficult to maintain that shared experience and that culture as the world and the school have grown more complex. I believe that 40 years ago, more of our collective energy was devoted to the community. Now, some of that is structural. When I got to Petty, there were 3 family-style meals a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, with chapel on Monday and Friday, as it is now, and a community meeting every week. We never went more than about 36 hours without bringing most, if not all, of the community together. More students shared similar experiences as activities were limited and specialization was less prevalent. Most students took only 4 or 5 classes. More faculty had similar job descriptions embodying the triple threat of teaching, dorm duty, and activities. More students played multiple sports and were therefore connected to a wider number of other students and other adults. Dorm teams were made up of 3 adults, so each adult was on duty 2 nights a week and every 3rd Saturday, all 3 terms. We literally crossed paths with one another more often. And there were fewer distractions from events on campus. Club sports, youth orchestras, online classes were not competing for the attention of Petty students to the degree that they are now. The absence of cell phones, social media, fewer video games, the lack of streaming, all of these meant that students were more likely to interact with one another as they crossed paths on campus or as they gathered in the dorms at night. And most students enjoyed greater independence from their parents. Remember those 3 payphones? And we must recognize that there were fewer areas for Petty students to be engaged in on campus. As I said, the visual art department was limited to the first floor of Long Street. There was no music, no robotics, no meaningful computer science, no signature experience. So student and adult interest and energy were focused in fewer areas, and not as much of the day was as tightly scheduled. Now, I'm not as naive enough to advocate that we automatically return to those structures. I know we cannot and should not return to 1986 in all kinds of ways. The world is different and Petty is different. And I'm thrilled to see the expansion of our programs, as in the arts. But we need to recognize that building community takes consistent, focused effort, especially in light of the many things that pull us in separate directions. Now, I'll speak for myself to say that I felt far more connected to a dorm and a dorm community when I had more frequent interaction with the students as a result of being on duty more often. I knew them better, they came to know me better, and it was tempting for me to feel more like a substitute teacher with a minimal commitment when I only had a few hours to spend in the dorm each week. Now, all of my colleagues, please understand, I am not advocating a return to a 3-person dorm team. There were very good reasons to expand that. But we need to be aware of how things have changed and consider how we might respond to the resulting impact on the sense of community. Now, for most of my talk, I've been looking backwards to the history of Petty. Now it's time to look ahead. The challenge for all of us, it seems to me, is to continue to move Petty forward, to make this a stronger school, a better school, while also safeguarding the community and the values that we share and that have been the heart of Petty for so many years, even as we run the risk of becoming more fragmented, more specialized in our interests, and more limited in our human interactions with each other. So, if I were the motivational speaker Matt Foley, Mr. Rulowich, help me out. You know Matt Foley? All right. This is a moment in the speech where I would hitch up my pants and explain what we all need to do to make sure we do not end up living in a van down by the river. I can't offer that direction, but I can tell you what I wish for Petty. I wish for the people of Petty to remain our greatest strength. I wish that kindness, warmth, generosity of spirit, inclusivity, and good humor will be the hallmark of students and professionals alike. I wish that Petty remains committed to the dignity and worth of each individual, that we continue to recruit and retain people with a range of talents, interests, abilities, backgrounds, and stories, and that these people are united by their excitement, their curiosity, and their character. I wish that the professional community at Petty continues to be as interested in the personal, social, and moral development of our students as they are in their own area of expertise, whether academic, artistic, athletic. And I wish that we all see ourselves as contributors to a whole Petty that is larger than any single component and larger than ourselves. And what of Petty's culture? That's probably a bit trickier, but equally significant. And in my experience as a teacher, a coach, and administrator, I have come to see 3 things as interrelated and of critical importance to any organization, any entity, whether it's a class, a team, a dorm, a department, a school. I believe that leadership creates culture. I believe that culture drives behavior, and I believe that behaviors allow us to reach our expectations wherever we set them. Leadership creates culture, culture drives behavior, behavior allows us to reach our expectations. So before we can think about what we want Petty to be, what we dream, what we wish for, we have to create a culture based on the school's mission and values. And it doesn't matter if you're head of school, an administrator, a department chair, a coach, a dorm soup, an artistic director, a prefect, a class officer, a club leader, or anyone trying to make this place better. Your leadership matters. Our individual and collective leadership creates the culture of Petty. And we need to recognize that it takes consistent, focused effort to cultivate, nurture, and to maintain. So my wish for Petty's culture. I wish for a Petty culture based on mission, not transaction. Now, as a director of admission, I know that independent schools are, by their very nature, transactional places. Families pay money for the product we offer, and that's the definition of a transaction. College placement, the possibility of being recruited for your talents, whether they're academic, athletic, or artistic, may all be a part of that transaction for you. But I hope everyone at Petty will continue to see that the mission of the school is paramount and that the mission is about all of us. I wish for a culture of consistent and committed effort, not complacency. John Green, former head of school, used to remind us that Petty was a school where the diploma meant more than the offer of admission. The diploma meant more. Petty was not a place that merely certified excellence. Petty values the growth and progress that each student makes as the result of their efforts and commitment here. I hope that's always true. Similarly, I wish for a culture of engagement, not entitlement. I've always appreciated that Petty is a place where students are the caretakers and the custodians of the school. You make Petty. Petty does not owe you. On a side note, follow Chef Stahl's advice and clean up after yourselves in the dining hall. I wish for a culture of proximity, not separation. One of the best speakers I've ever heard is a guy named Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative. If you ever get a chance to hear him talk, don't miss it. And he's talking about very weighty issues: incarceration, death row, social justice. But he talks about the power of proximity, being close to people, meaningful connections. And it always strikes me that this is the most unique opportunity for proximity. We are all here all the time. We need to focus on our proximity, not our separation or isolation. I wish for a culture of gratitude, appreciation, and humility, not self-importance. I love that my students say thank you when they go out the door at the end of class. That's such a Petty moment. I think we should have a culture based on passion, not indifference. Many years ago, I was talking about the Scarlet Letter and Radio Raheem from Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Again, not many folks are going to get that. Radio Raheem had love and hate on his knuckles. And we were talking about whether Hester Prynne really loved the father of her child. No spoiler alerts here. And one young student in my class said, we're talking about the difference, the opposite of love. And she said, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. I thought that was really remarkable. I still get a Christmas card from her. And whether you love what's going on at Petty or you hate what's going on at Petty, get involved. Don't be indifferent to it. And I think a culture where we're always looking for meaning, reflection, inspiration, connection, not only achievement, is important. And finally, perhaps, maybe there was something to Ted Lasso's message, maybe a culture of curiosity, not judgment. Each of us has a role to play in establishing that culture of Petty, and so again, maybe that question from Dead Poets Society is appropriate. What will your verse be? So I'm going to conclude my remarks here, I know we're getting over time, to connecting us to one of Petty's 20th century founders. In preparing this address, I thought about Mr. Tattersall, a friend of mine, colleague of the Moonies for many years. He retired in 2012, but his influence at Petty is still significant, I think, for those of us who knew him. And although he died several years ago, he continues to influence my thinking. He wasn't an overtly religious figure. He wasn't the chaplain, and he rarely spoke in chapel except for Blair Week. But he was as genuinely concerned for the spiritual life of Petty, the heart and soul of Petty, as anyone on campus. And so because I've been thinking about him, that brings me to Bruce Springsteen. T was a huge Springsteen fan, and he and Amy and I went to a number of Springsteen concerts, probably with Marty too. And in one conversation with Sandy, he casually mentioned to me that Queen of the Supermarket was the best love song ever written. I didn't suggest that to Dr. Venanzi for the Valentine's Day, but maybe I should have. In this story, the speaker in the song, and it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman, is deeply in love with the checkout girl at the supermarket. And through the course of the lyrics, he's trying to drum up the courage to tell her how he feels about her. Springsteen writes, "I'm in love with the queen of the supermarket as the evening sky turns blue. A dream awaits in aisle number 2. With my shopping cart, I move through the heart of a sea of fools so blissfully unaware that they're in the presence of something wonderful and rare." For me, the key line refers to the sea of fools so blissfully unaware that they're in the presence of something wonderful and rare. For Sandy, life at Petty, life anywhere, was made richer by appreciating all the moments of human interaction, not only those that are extraordinary, but also those that might be seen as more ordinary, like a trip to the supermarket. As we all think about the culture we want to create for Petty, I hope you will all remember the less spectacular but equally meaningful moments at Petty where friendships are forged, lessons are learned, lasting connections are established, and culture is thus built. For Sandy, the experience of Petty was something wonderful and rare, and I hope you will truly appreciate all of the moments you enjoy here. These moments, the values they represent, form the foundation of the culture we create together and guide our behaviors. We can't lose sight of their power or their meaning. In her remarks to the employees of Petty, in which she announced her upcoming retirement, Ms. Rodriguez said, "Treasure this community and protect it with all your heart." She is absolutely right. The future of Petty depends on you, and the culture of Petty is in your hands, not mine. Maybe Coach Brooks was right. Great moments are born from great opportunity. Petty will provide you with great opportunities. It's up to you to make the most of them for your own development, but Petty will also provide you with great opportunities to make Petty an even greater school. I encourage you to seize those moments as well. Mr. Tattersall lived by one other Springsteen lyric, my final pop culture reference this morning. And I know this is really not a mic drop moment for me. I have the rest of the winter and some comments to read and a full spring term to get through. But a note to the HR department, if I'm willing to negotiate a severance package if that seems appropriate after this speech. But I expect I'll be around a little bit longer. But I am acutely aware that the end of my time at Petty is near. And the line that I'm referring to is this: "One sunny morning we'll rise, I know, and I'll meet you further on up the road. One sunny morning we'll rise, I know, and I'll meet you further on up the road." Sandy never said goodbye to anyone. My time as an employee at Petty is drawing to a close, but this is not goodbye. Petty will always have a special place in my heart. I fell in love with the Petty I first encountered 40 years ago, even though it was a much different place, and I remain smitten with the people and the culture of this place. I hope you will grow to feel as passionate about Petty over the course of your time here as I, but please don't be indifferent. To borrow the road trip metaphor employed by Luke and Jaleesa this year, and to borrow another observation that I first heard from Mr. Green, I know the low fuel light is illuminated on my dashboard. It's time for me to pull off before I run out of gas. But I have truly enjoyed the 40-year ride. Perhaps I'll meet you further on up the road. Alla Viva.